So as I just mentioned, the HAC is a discussion-based forum for housing topics in Silicon Valley. The idea is to make these action-oriented. So we discuss, but we also come to ways to get engaged and get working on various issues that surround housing in our county. The HAC is actually, it's older than SV at Home. It used to exist under a different organization, but we brought it back since we are the sort of convening space for housing discussions in Santa Clara County. And today we are very happy to be joined by two special guests. We have Nina Senn from the League of Women Voters. Nina, you can wave just to show people where you are. So Nina is the League of Women Voters Oakland board member and also a Bay Area League speaker for Prop 15, as well as being an attorney mediator and a facilitator. She served as the president of the board for SEEDS, which is a leading Bay Area conflict resolution nonprofit, and also as an Oakland Unified School District school board vice president and director. And as a local policymaker, she has authored and co-authored and advocated for legislation related to school and student safety, to human sex trafficking prevention, to restorative justice, improved government practices, and increased school funding. We also have with us today, J.R. Starrett. J.R. is the Director of Advocacy and Community at NPH. NPH is the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, the body that represents the various affordable housing developers that we have here in Northern California, in the Bay Area in particular. And J.R. has a wealth of experience working with progressive electoral campaigns and developing electoral strategies. Before joining NPH, he was the Senior Director of State Government Affairs for Common Sense Media, where he led state legislative and political advocacy efforts in policy areas that affect children's access to digital literacy education. So what we're going to do is we'll start off with a presentation by Nina, and JR will weave in some housing aspects there. Nina. So Nina, would you be able to give us a quick overview of what Prop 15 looks like, what it means?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen with everybody. Hang on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you can see it? Mitch, can you give me a signal? Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time out to spend some time learning about Proposition 15. It's been over 4 decades in the making, really, and it's something that goes very core to my personal background. One thing that I didn't have in the bio, and thank you, Mitch, for introducing me, is that I have spent a fair amount of time in Silicon Valley area. I'm a proud graduate of Santa Clara, and I certainly struggled with finding affordable housing when I was a student at Santa Clara University. I also worked at eBay for several years and commuted from Oakland because of affordable housing, largely reasons. So I get it and definitely would love to engage in conversation about it today with you. So let's get started. We're going to do a high-level overview of the proposition and take your questions at the end, as Mitch described. The first thing that I want to just go directly to is that this is closing a commercial and industrial property tax loophole that's been there since 1978 when Proposition 13 was passed. And it reclaims $12 billion per year because once it's passed. Something that I learned while getting to know what they were trying to do with schools and communities first was that out of the that only 10% of the largest commercial properties that they are the ones that would contribute 92% of the revenue. So it's largely only going to impact the larger, bigger, older companies, not the smaller ones. And the point is really to put this back into our schools and our local communities in terms of, our public services and for first responders and parks, infrastructure, libraries, as well as into our schools, which have been in dire need of funding for decades. And what it also does is it protects all residential property. It's not going to affect residential property, and it's not going to affect agricultural property. They will be exempt from Proposition 15. And you can see our icon here, Dolores Huerta. In terms of some other benefits related to small businesses, and I also want to make sure JR has a chance to talk about some aspects, is that there's something new that's been added, which I think is really beneficial, and small business owners that I've talked to also emphasize this, that there's a tax exemption for equipment related to the business that falls under $500,000. So small businesses who own property, or commercial property owners of $3 million or less, are exempt from Proposition 15, as well as will benefit from this tax exemption. And there's an endorsement from the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce at the bottom, which is also very significant. In terms of the local control of the revenue, it's going to be allocated on a 60-40 basis in accordance with the current statutes, which is in the public education sphere. That means that the allocation will be in accordance with the local control funding formula, and then 60% will be allocated to the local services through the cities and the counties. There's also measures that are put in place in terms of strict accountability, because I think we all know that there's a certain amount of distrust with our government. And so what's really important about Proposition 15 is it anticipates that. And so there will be a task force that's formed to monitor and make sure that the allocations are made in accordance with Proposition 15. When I was first looking at this particular Schools and Communities First initiative about a year and a half ago, it was really important to me that it had grassroots support. And because I was deciding whether I was going to spend my time really supporting it and working with getting it over the finish line. And so at that point, it wasn't as many as it is now. It's really in the hundreds and hundreds of organizations and unions and individuals and elected officials that have supported it. But I decided, because I was more familiar with the League of Women Voters, that I would work with them. They were really coming out as leaders and signing the initial proposition, because it was intended to be on the 2018 ballot. And so they really came out strong for that, and then was decided to wait till 2020 for the presidential election. And we'll talk about how to get more involved after JR has a chance to speak, but I wanted to make sure that we really looked at the ways that where we are in terms of the conditions that we live in terms of the shortage of affordable housing. And he's really the expert to talk about that and what Proposition 15 can do to make that situation alleviate the stress in terms of our housing shortage. So I had meant to include, to ask JR to advise a little bit earlier in the slides, but I kind of got into a role. So, apologies, JR.
No worries, Nina. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Hi, everyone. J.R. Starrett, NPH, Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. Thanks very much for having us today to talk about Prop 15. I want to lead off by saying that NPH is a proud endorser of Prop 15. We support Schools and Communities First. We're going to be working with the campaign to ensure that we can do everything that we can to get it over the finish line in November. Just kind of a rough, really what I have is a lot more additive to the presentation that Nina gave, and I'm happy to kind of go deeper into the question and answer period, but just kind of give a rough overview of how Prop 15 affects us in the affordable housing space. So kind of from the top, we believe that Prop 15 would reclaim up to $12 billion annually for schools and local communities by closing those commercial tax property tax loopholes We believe of that 12 billion, 7 billion of those dollars would actually go directly to local governments that then could be used and as a resource to incentivizing housing construction. From a housing perspective, the current system has also really contributed to high housing prices by incentivizing commercial property owners to keep the land off the market and undeveloped. That's a really interesting land use perspective on this. We think that action has really starved off local governments from their critical revenues and then limiting what they can do to address the housing crisis in their own areas. And then finally, we also think that large numbers of commercial properties, especially in urban areas near the suburbs, properties with tremendous potential of being developed, are currently empty lots, parking lots, gas stations, strip malls, big box stores, things of that nature, are underutilized, specifically because of the protection under Prop 13. We think if that protection no longer exists, those properties, it would be much more beneficial for the property owners to use that land for residential development. So those are kind of a few of the different areas. Certainly, the revenue that would be generated from from local communities would be beneficial for housing, and then also the land use as well. And look forward to your questions.
Thanks, JR. Okay, well, so let's open it up for questions. I'm gonna go over just sort of some discussion ground rules here. So let's all remember to keep our discussion respectful and be mindful of how much space we're taking up. And to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard, we'll be doing this by raised hands, which we'll be doing by the thumbs up button. If everyone can look down at their reactions and just test that out, if you can give the thumbs up, make sure you know how to do so. I'm seeing some appear there. Okay, so that's how we'll be doing hand raising throughout this. So also I'll be giving priority to folks who have spoken less so far in terms of who gets to ask a question or add discussion first. And just to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard, I'd ask everyone to keep their questions and comments to under 90 seconds at a time. And if you go long, I will gently remind you of that one. So we're gonna start with questions only, and then we'll move on to a freer form discussion where people can make comments as well. So let's see, does anyone have a question to ask? I see, oh, there's a hand raised. All right, you can use the hand raise function too. I didn't realize that was enabled here. I saw Susan Russell first.
I didn't have a question. I'm sorry. I was just testing it.
Oh, apologies.
I mean,
No
I'm
worries.
supporting it. I guess my question might be, how do we overcome the editorials like in the San Jose Mercury today?
Oh, I haven't seen that one. JR or Nina, do you have a response there?
I'm sorry, my internet cut out.
Did you happen to see that editorial?
I didn't see it.
I think, Susan, I think I saw it actually. It was a relation specific to housing. Is that the one that you're referring to in terms of increasing in development in Santa Clara County? Was that Susan? She's okay.
Oh, okay. No, it was on saying that we should be reforming the whole thing, that it's unfair for residential and we shouldn't be doing this piecemeal.
Right, right. So what I would, so I haven't a chance to really think about it too much. I read it about 10 minutes before our meeting. But what I would say is a couple things. One is that, yeah, I think that we should be looking at the whole thing, because even with Proposition 15, it is not sufficient to cover the costs that we've been, we have to incur. It's only going to help us part of the way there. We're being the fifth largest economy in the world. We are on a per pupil basis, for example, in our schools, we're among the bottom 10 to 12 states on a per pupil basis. And so as a result, our students are not as competitive as other states or, in fact, other countries. So we have much bigger a structural issue that we need to cover off in terms of really getting our state into being more competitive than it is now in terms of setting up our students for success. And also being, I don't know, so much about where you all live individually, but if you take urban centers like San Jose or Oakland, there's a vast difference in terms of what people have access to in terms of the quality of their local services or libraries and schools. So I agree with the philosophy that we need to do something larger. However, getting even Prop 15 onto the ballot was a huge undertaking. I mean, it took 41 years to get to this place. And it was amongst the policymakers, especially in Sacramento, it was considered the political third rail. Nobody wanted to touch this. So it really took a lot, as you can see, the hundreds and hundreds, I think it's like 800 organizations to really pull together and create a coalition to get us even part of the way there.
Thanks, Nina. JR, did you have anything to add?
No, I thought that was great.
Great. Oh, oops. Looks like we have a hand raised from Zelda. I'm going to ask it unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I seem to have removed my my picture or myself from the screen, but it doesn't matter. You can hear me. I have two questions. Some of you might have seen this morning, at least I saw in the East Bay Times, I assume that the San Jose Mercury also ran it, a really negative editorial. I've been a supporter of Prop 15 and the Evolve campaign. I'd like somebody to address this issue that they raised, which in fact, they're saying, how shall I put it? Residential property homeowners have not been paying more than big commercial property owners. That's a major claim for Prop 15, and it's one I've been making, and if it's not accurate, I'd like to know. And the other question I have is, this is to J.R. Starrett, is there anything, I haven't read the measure recently, and I know it was amended, I believe. Is there anything in Prop 15 that specifically designates, earmarks monies, revenues for affordable housing for low and moderate income, or at least for lower income households? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question is, that's what we were just talking about, the same editorial that was run in both papers, since it's the same ownership. So I think that Nina's response there still goes forward. The second question though, JR, do you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I do. And the simple answer is no, there is no dedicated earmark within Prop 15 that would divert these funds to affordable housing. We believe, given the effort by local communities to construct affordable housing and the difficulty for them to raise revenue locally to address the access to affordable housing development, we believe that actually would be how they would use some of these additional funds, that 40% that is diverted back to local communities. And again, that's almost $7 billion annually to our local governments as resources to put towards issues like affordable housing and other key infrastructure issues that they currently have shortfalls with.
Great, thank you, JR. And I'll say that I think as housing advocates, we'll be doing work to certainly advocate for spending the money that needs to be spent on affordable housing when that money is available. Let's get a question from Catherine Hedges.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. And I'm also a longtime supporter of Prop 15. Might as well turn my picture on. But when JR was talking, he said that, I mean, I understand that businesses, commercial property owners are motivated not to sell or redevelop if they have a strip mall and the property tax is ridiculously low on it. but I don't know if you're familiar with the specific issue in San Jose that the city has a really, really high barrier to rezoning commercial to residential because they already feel like San Jose has too many homes. They always complain about the jobs housing imbalance and how Cupertino expects everybody to live in San Jose, and San Jose is always broke because San Jose doesn't have enough jobs and doesn't have enough businesses paying tax. So I don't know if changing the property tax situation for the businesses is necessarily going to change that in San Jose. I don't know about other cities to speak to their policies. I mean, Cupertino might be a thing because they have all the jobs.
Well, certainly, I would say in my work with our policymakers down in San Jose, I haven't necessarily received that same sentiment as far as San Jose having too many houses. I think, a number of our policymakers are very much dedicated to, generating more housing, specifically affordable housing, but also market rate housing in San Jose. And I think that they should. The city really needs more access to housing units for its residents. I think that where they have difficulty is identifying revenue to actually be able to subsidize or incentivize that housing development. And again, that's why Prop 15, we believe, would be something that could incentivize that construction. Because, as you said, it would be, no longer shielding those property owners of large unopened or undeveloped parcels into with that tax shelter of being incentivize them to use that and change that property over for future development of residential.
Yeah, I guess I would add that this is sort of a San Jose specific but long-running issue that typically city councils have been reluctant to rezone commercial land to housing land in San Jose. I'm not sure that necessarily the city's incentives change with this measure, but if there are property owners who want to redevelop into housing, that does create some degree of pressure on the city to respond to what's being asked of them. So it at least raises the issue to public debate. And then from there, it's a question of, well, what's all of our part in being advocates for building housing?
Yeah, and I would say, Mitch, there is an incentive for cities here to actually rezone to this because largely cities generate tax revenue off of sales tax. And so having commercial properties, having even big parcels of commercial properties, auto malls, big box stores, things of that nature, it's an incentive for a city to use that because it's tapping into a higher tax base of sales tax rather than just the property tax. So, again, we believe that, this would incentivize cities because it would mean more property taxes coming back to cities.
Okay, I see a question from Nicholas Hamilton. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, Nick Hamilton here in Menlo Park, just north of the county line. I'm curious just to hear maybe JR from you or Nina, either of you, just a little bit more information about the vacant property shelter that's in Prop 13, the way the status quo, and it's just a little bit more on the mechanics of what's expected to change and how that might bring to bear different incentives on developments in across the region.
Nina, would you like to take that one?
You're on mute.
Sure, JR, I can start. Sure. And definitely welcome you to add in your expertise. You're the housing guy. So if I understand correctly, your question, is it Nicholas? Looks like you're showing up as Nicholas. Okay. In terms of the vacant lots, part of the, I think one of the real benefits around Prop 15 is that owners of the vacant lots don't have an incentive to develop on them because they can just let them sit. But if they, but with Prop 15, if through the every 3-year reassessment, they would be incentivized to make productive use of those lots. And so that's where we're seeing that as something that could have some really significant benefits over time. Does that answer part of your question at least?
Definitely. More information would be welcome too. I'd love to hear more about just more about the details of that, and what some of the expectations or forecasts or aspirations might be in that department.
On the aspirational front, JR, maybe you could add in some of the thoughts and like ideas that, you know, since we're talking about aspirations, I think that would be something fun to explore and follow up with you on if we need to do some more research.
Yeah, I think, we definitely need to do some more research. I mean, I'd say as far as just, the intent, again, I think it is ensuring that we are utilizing properties to the fullest extent to that are available for home construction, right? I think that that is what we know is an area where the state is in critical need. There's an estimate that right now we need across the state 3 to 4 million housing units, and about 20 to 30% of those would actually be affordable homes. And so I think that's certainly the inspiration, I think, at least from our perspective at MPH, for supporting.
I have seen also some interesting work from my local assembly member, Buffy Wicks, and in terms of really looking at, I mentioned that I was commuting from Oakland to San Jose for work, and what Buffy has been working on for at least a year is really talk about aspirational, just kind of looking at the Bay Area and thinking, okay, where are our transit hubs, and can we build, affordable housing, near those hubs so people are spending less time on the roads. It's much better for the environment and also just better quality of life. So I would say stay tuned to some of the work that she and others who are thinking like that are doing.
Great, thank you both. I'm not seeing more hands, so maybe we can move into a more open discussion format. So if anyone has comments or other things or other questions they're thinking about, please raise your hand.
So I've got a question for the group, Mitch. Is that all right if I take a liberty? I would love to, talking of aspirations, and also, I just really appreciate the work that you all do and your interest in this area. And, I mentioned for personal reasons why, I've personally been impacted by that. And what I didn't share also was, on the school side, and, when Prop 13 passed, I remember it very vividly because I was in what was called junior high school then, and my mother was a longtime teacher, and she wasn't political at all. She was a teacher and a mom. And so when I saw her pick up the picket sign to oppose Prop 13, it got my attention. And it did change our lives individually too, because it put us into a place of being housing insecure. We almost lost our house twice when I was, at home at those years. And so, so I have very deep feelings about trying to fix this. And I'm wondering for all of you, if you, feel like you want to share in the chat or, out loud, what would you like to see? If we could bring in an infusion of $12 billion per year into our state, what does that mean to you? And, what are some of the things that you would like to solve?
guess as people take a moment to think about that, I can share sort of a similar perspective. I went to public high school in San Francisco, and this was long after Prop 13, and I felt that because we very much struggle with funding. We, while this was also during a budget crisis, so we had class sizes go up from about average of 30 students to about 40 students. And in passing periods, you actually couldn't move through the halls without pushing through other people because there just wasn't enough space on the campus to hold all the students that needed to be there. So definitely the effects of not having that revenue, of having less spending per student, feel very real to me. And that's one of the reasons I'm very strongly supportive of Prop 15.
Thank you, Mitch.
So I think if it passes, it's going to be largely because people feel strongly about the schools. I mean, I'm active in the League of Women Voters and affordable housing, but I don't think that's what's going to carry the day. And I do have some concern. I know no one knew about the coronavirus when they put this on the ballot, but I think there is some concern maybe with hurting businesses at this point, which troubles me in terms of I also, we've lived here 45 years, and I think it's terribly unfair that we pay such low taxes compared to our neighbors. So, I mean, I do think the whole structural thing of Prop 13 is really unfair, but I know it is like the third rail, I understand.
Thank you, Susan. Mitch, looks like there's some comments in the chat. I don't know if you want to raise those up.
Sure, yes, thank you. I was just reading those. We have some folks talking about the digital divide that could be addressed, which is in terms of access to internet and broadband, as well as having funds to build ELI affordable housing. That's extremely low income affordable housing. Another person also was talking about ELI affordable housing, as well as other things like community alternatives to policing, community land trusts, public banking, as well as equalizing funding for all schools, which the measure doesn't quite accomplish that, but it certainly would make it easier to do. Okay, so we have another question here in the chat. If this is passed, how will this revenue be used in an equity lens to address the disparities in our neighborhoods?
I'm wondering if that is a school related or more of a housing related. Should I just make an assumption, or would Marissa like to add clarification?
Seems like it could go either way, but I'll let Marissa speak for that.
I can jump in too, just speaking at it from a housing perspective. Yeah, both, please, absolutely. So from a housing perspective, with the limited land available to build in urban areas, developers are more than likely to redevelop existing housing, either by demolishing or building new buildings, or by renovating and making those existing units, more high priced. So, we look at this as the potential for new development, both from a land use and a revenue perspective, as actually being an issue that would help, really combat displacement. And as we know in the equity community, really, as far as housing displacement is really, one of the areas that cuts into our communities right now because of the lack of affordable housing, because of the current existing policies, and how easy it is for market rate developers to come in and use those properties and just access, we see displacement. And so, we do think that this would actually be something to help combat displacement.
And on the school front, we'll just cover both. I mentioned in the presentation about the local control funding formula, and so what that was instituted in 2014, and that was really intentionally focused on being more equitable, because the tax structure and the funding it just was really lacking before then. So they're trying to fix that through the LCFF. And so the allocation through LCFF is to focus on schools and students that fall into the categories of either qualifying for free and reduced lunch, which in Oakland, 75% of the students do. It also focuses on students who speak English as a second language and our foster youth. So really focusing on the high needs, underserved students and schools. Now, I also want to add, because I know this has been a question, is that every single student will be receiving funding, so to speak. Not individually, but all students in the state of California will be benefiting from Prop 15. So it won't be just the neediest schools. They will just be receiving allocations based on need, but every student will be receiving an allocation.
Thank you both for that. And does anyone from I guess I'd say our audience here have other thoughts about using an equity lens to address these disparities in our neighborhoods in terms of the revenue raised by Prop 15?
You know, I guess what I would just say, hi, David Meyer from SV at Home, is, you know, that question seems to cut to almost the core of this kind of group here that we have, the HAC, and kind of the goal of it as bringing together people in the South Bay who do want to get involved and continue to advocate on kind of this whole range of housing issues, because clearly it's going to take specific local advocacy with cities. I mean, there's going to have to still be specific approaches to trying to hold cities accountable and trying to push cities and individual jurisdictions on these issues. And, you know, it's something that, you know, many people have been working on for a really long time. There's clearly new opportunities, and maybe opportunity is the wrong word, but momentum behind cities, I think, being primed, and city councils to try to take on these issues in a more holistic way. And while, you know, I don't necessarily have a great solution for all of us on this, I think it just more speaks to the fact that that's why we're glad that there are people here at this HAC, and we love hearing from people about other ways that they think that we can get more folks engaged to hold cities accountable on these things. You know, we have a very important equity related campaign that's basically ends is the wrong word, but, you know, next week on Tuesday, the San Jose City Council is going to be considering a commercial linkage fee for the city, which would be raising millions of dollars every year for affordable housing, based on kind of the economic growth and development success that San Jose is having, linking that growth, that success, that construction of office development to affordable housing, to providing more resources for people in the community who are at risk of displacement, as kind of JR was talking about before. And the city of San Jose is also rolling out work that they've done related to an anti-displacement strategy for the city and other proposed policies that they are considering exploring to more directly tackle this issue. And that's going to be coming back to the city council in a couple of weeks. And we're seeing cities are coming forward with different plans and approaches. The city of Mountain View is going to be also discussing this displacement issue in, well, next month, right, Mitch? And we're trying to push other cities to think about this as well. So Sunnyvale is one of our kind of next targets in this area. And we definitely appreciate interest from members of this group who want to get involved in those efforts. Like I said, the big one is this commercial linkage fee in San Jose. We can include the link to our website in the chat, maybe, if you're interested in more information about that. And and how to still make your voice heard on that. But we're going to need a big push on that, and there are many other issues related to housing equity, broader equity issues in our communities where we're involved in this organization, either in the lead or in supporting other groups. And we want to help serve as an entry point for advocates into that work as well.
David, I really appreciate you mentioning that, because on this issue of equity, it is going to require us to be active and to advocate with our local elected officials, and to show up and to, communicate in whatever way you feel comfortable. But that's how you really instill a sense of equity as a priority. And so that kind of follow-up and focus is really important for the elected officials to know that that's what you care about, and to remind them the accountability piece is really important. And just want to circle back to how you can, how we can get to a place of having some funding through Prop 15 is that this campaign does need more help with the phone banking and getting endorsements for those that haven't endorsed yet. I know there's a big blitz happening. And so would really love to, make sure that you guys are plugged in those ways. But because I'm getting calls, it feels like almost every day asking me to do more, but phone banking and so on. So I'm looking for other people to join in.
Yes, great point, Nina. I just dropped the link in the chat to the sign up form for phone banking. I have done it once so far. It was a good experience. I didn't have the right technology to do it, but I worked with it.
Yeah, and the key really for this campaign is that, obviously the large corporations who stand, to lose, if you will, are the ones that are extremely well funded. And so, we're expecting them to have $100 million to throw at this. As a grassroots coalition, even though it's significant in size, it still can't match that. I mean, we're hoping to at least go halfway, have that same level of funding. And but what we do have is we have the right story. I mean, we're on the right side of this. This is a David and Goliath situation. And so we need to be able to get in front and, get out and talk to your friends and your coworkers and your family and get in front of the message, because the misrepresentations have, they've been underway for a while. And fortunately, the campaign was very successful in the Superior Court earlier this month and the court sided with the campaign that the opposition was trying to put in misleading information from the state ballot. So that has been, that is not going to be the case, thank goodness, but it's still happening in ads and so on. So, but what I've just found is once you share with people what this is all about, then they get it right away. Especially, we were not anticipating a global pandemic, obviously. And so we need even more. We needed it desperately before, but even more so now.
Definitely. I want to say thank you to Sean for sharing your experience with open public schools. And Sean had a question here. Given that municipalities have different priorities, will they be able to use some of the 60% allotted to them in addition to the required 40% to fund their schools?
So the schools will be funded, will receive the 40% of the total funding for schools. So they will be receiving their current funding plus the additional 40% from once Prop 15 passes.
So I think the question was, there's the additional 40%, but then of the remaining 60% raised by schools and communities first, is there an option to invest some of that as well into schools?
Well, okay, thanks for clarifying, Mitch. So that 60% that's allocated to public services, I would say there's indirect benefits to schools as well, because those the 60% of the funding supports libraries in part, and first responder services, health and human services, and you can't just look at the schools supporting their own needs. It's really a full community effort. So if you have a better infrastructure, then it's definitely going to help the schools and help the students. But it wouldn't be that it wouldn't be the case where a portion of the 60% could be allocated to the school district directly. That wouldn't be possible.
I see. Thanks, Nina. Another question here we have is it possible that the commercial linkage fee and Prop 15, the property tax increases in Prop 15 on underutilized commercial land would incentivize those landowners to convert to residential?
Yes.
In a word.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We believe so. I think, again, I think kind of that you have to assume as some of these larger properties, especially, former properties that might be, abandoned retail, sitting vacant. The assumption is that commercial owners or owners of that property that's owned currently commercial are not actually putting these properties on the market for residential development because they're afraid of giving up their tax benefit of it. And so I think this would be an incentive for those owners to either move the properties through or also to work with a developer to develop the property themselves for residential.
And I guess I would just say too, I mean, I know that kind of came from Catherine's question too, especially related to San Jose. And I think that, totally agree with JR. And I think that there is kind of the other piece, of course, which as Catherine has alluded to, is that there still are, we can create these incentives and we can put in place some of these policies, but at the end of the day, cities will also still be trying to, influence those decisions in their own ways. And Catherine pointed out that the city of San Jose has historically attempted to avoid conversion of jobs creating land to housing land. But again, this is kind of goes back to that point of, none of these individual actions that are being taken are going to be the thing alone that's going to lead to more housing or more affordable housing. This is an important piece. The commercial linkage fee is an important piece, but we still need to think about how we advocate with cities, how we think about specific projects and opportunities. Those things are still going to be important, and we're still going to have to really be organized at local levels around these opportunities, because none of this is going to magically lead to the outcomes we want. This is a huge piece of it. It's going to support us in the outcomes that we want, but we're still going to have to keep working at a local level to secure the specific outcomes that we're working towards.
I just wanted to mention that I think that the editorials in the newspapers are very compelling, and I hope you're getting out in front of them. I'm assuming that people met with the editorial board for the Mercury and just were not successful, but because of that editorial, I would hope there'd be lots of letters to the editor that would try and combat that, and that you will be getting ahead of the game. And for other, because I think a lot of people who don't know how to vote depend a lot on the endorsements of the newspapers.
Yes, thank you, Susan. And we have been pushing out, and people have been asked and have been writing commentary and letters to the editor for quite some time. I had one published with the Mercury News about 9 months ago, and they seem to come with some regularity on both sides. I think that I know the editor there, and I know his leanings. So we need to, that's part of the messaging is, yes, I 100% agree with you. We need to make sure that we continue to communicate, continue to get our own, perspectives into the newspapers, and it's going to take all of that for sure. And thank you for lifting that up.
Definitely. Letters to the editor are often a very successful tactic for for getting your views heard. So we're about 5 minutes from the end here, so I do want to get into some closing announcements and just give those opportunities for folks to plug into the campaign going forward. So, let's see here. I want to share the campaign's social media here. So you can hear what's going on with the campaign. This don't turn into links. Well, also knows again as links, but you might be able to copy them over in the meantime. But if you look up Schools First CA, you'll find, it looks like on every social media, you'll find the campaign. And then once again, I'm going to share here the phone bank link. And then I want to also encourage everyone to look out for emails from SFeet Home in your inbox. We are constantly monitoring what's going on in this and other housing situations to bring you the latest news. Yesterday, we sent out a blast about the most recent developments in the sort of eviction moratorium negotiations that are happening statewide. That's worth checking out. And we'll add you to the mailing list if you sign up for this event, so you don't have to do any more action there. And then this HAC, the Housing Action Coalition, is a monthly series. So next month, we'll be holding our HAC on September 24th. Instead of our usual Friday, that's a Thursday, September 24th, because we don't want to conflict with NPH's conference, which is on Friday, since a lot of folks will be there. And that HAC, our focus will be, or tentatively our topic is looking at opportunity housing, which is sort of the San Jose term for the idea of allowing duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes to be built citywide. There's a similar effort actually going on with SB 1120 statewide. You can also read about on our newsletter, but this is sort of our look at missing middle type housing, the sort of not apartment, but not single family home types of housing that haven't been allowed to be built. So we'll be talking about that with a couple of guests next month, September 24th. So with that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you very much to JR and to Nina for joining us as our speakers today, and hope to see you at the next HAC. All right, have a great rest of your Friday, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for joining. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.